Tonight we slip quietly into the moonlit sands of ancient Egypt, where your bed is not a soft mattress and your pillow is definitely not a plush cloud. Instead, your head hovers stiffly over a carved block of stone, cold and unyielding, while desert air whispers around you. The stars above glimmer like tiny watchful eyes, and the Nile hums in the distance. You probably won't survive this kind of comfort without a sore neck, but the Egyptians thought it was the height of practical design. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes adjust to a dim lamplight inside a mud brick house. A low bed frame, woven with reeds, creaks faintly beneath you. Instead of sinking into a feather-filled pillow, you rest the weight of your skull against a sculpted stone arc. The curve cradles your neck while lifting your head, leaving your face exposed to the occasional cool breeze. At first touch, the polished surface feels unwelcoming, almost like you've fallen asleep on a garden statue. Yet, to an Egyptian living thousands of years ago, this pillow is not a punishment, it's a tool of survival, artistry, and even magic. You notice that many of these headrests were made from alabaster, a luminous stone often used for canopic jars and temple carvings. Others were carved from simple limestone, shaped into elegant arches supported by a flat base. The design is deceptively simple. A column holds a crescent-like cradle at the top, just wide enough to keep your skull steady. Some scholars argue whether the earliest versions were purely practical or whether they carried symbolic weight from the beginning. What no one doubts is that these designs appear across tombs, homes, and temples so clearly, Egyptians took their headrests seriously. Try to imagine dozing off on one. Your head lifts slightly higher than the rest of your body, like a trophy balanced carefully on display. You might mutter in protest, but there's logic hidden in this discomfort. Stone doesn't collapse, doesn't mold, doesn't attract vermin. In a land where sand sneaks into every crevice and insects swarm with the heat, that rigidity means your face stays clean and protected. Think of it less like a pillow, more like a defensive shield for your dreams. Not exactly a memory foam upgrade, but at least no scarabs are crawling across your lips at midnight. Historians still argue whether these earliest headrests were inspired by everyday stools or had an independent origin. Some point to African pastoralist cultures, where similar wooden neck rests served both as pillows and as portable head supports during herding trips. Others claim the Egyptians invented their own style in response to climate. What remains undeniable is that the earliest versions, dating back over 4,000 years, reveal an obsession with the head, both as a physical anchor and as a sacred vessel for the soul. Stone may seem cruel, but its permanence was part of the appeal. When artisans polished alabaster smooth, the surface caught lamplight like captured moonlight. Sleeping on such brilliance wasn't just functional, it was a statement. You didn't simply rest your weary bones, you announced, "Look at my wealth," even when unconscious. And wealth in Egypt was never quiet. Even your midnight snoring had to look like a ritual. Picture a craftsman in a workshop near Memphis, chisel striking stone in a steady rhythm. Dust gathers on the floor as curved supports emerge from blocks. He isn't carving an afterthought, he's shaping a necessity. Every groove matters because the head it holds matters. Egyptian belief centered on the Ka, the life force that needed to be preserved. Protect the head, protect the Ka. A pillow wasn't just for comfort, it was for eternal preservation. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some early headrests were carved so tall they looked like miniature columns stolen from a temple. Archaeologists debate if these towering designs were practical or ceremonial. You, however, trying to nap on one of those, would likely end up with a crick in your neck worthy of a chiropractor's horror reel. Maybe that's why only a handful of such giants survive. They were Instagrammable in 2500 BCE but not exactly bedtime friendly. The stone headrest also whispers another story. permanence in death. Many were found nestled beneath mummies, holding up their heads for eternity. In life, the same design cooled sweaty nights. In death, it kept the soul propped high enough to face eternity with dignity. You begin to realize this object wasn't meant to pamper, it was meant to endure. And enduring it was. While you dream of feather beds and Tempur-Pedic commercials, the Egyptians thought stone was the reliable choice. They traded a night of cozy softness for centuries of preservation, a fair deal in their eyes. After all, in a world where pharaohs built pyramids to outlast the desert, what's a little neck pain compared to eternal stability? You shift slightly in imagination, feeling the hard curve dig into your skin. You picture yourself complaining to your Egyptian host, "This isn't a pillow, it's a medieval prank." Your host smirks, pointing out that you'll be cooler, cleaner, and maybe, just maybe, protected from wandering spirits. Suddenly, you feel a shiver. Stone isn't just stone, it's a charm, a barrier, a bridge between this world and the next. So here you lie, suspended between discomfort and protection. The stone headrest may not cuddle you to sleep, but it promises something greater, a safe passage through the night, and maybe, if you're lucky, through eternity. You wake with a stiff neck and decide stone isn't exactly your thing. Luckily for you, not all Egyptians were content balancing their heads on polished rock. As time passes, the workshop floor changes sound. Instead of the sharp clang of chisels on alabaster, you hear the gentler rasp of saws and the woody thump of mallets. Now, your headrest is carved from sycamore, tamarisk, or ebony, smooth, fragrant, and lighter in the hand. You run your fingers along its grain, polished with oils until it gleams like honey in candlelight. Wooden headrests take the same crescent form as their stone cousins, but the material offers a little give, a little warmth. Place your neck on the arch, and it no longer feels like a grave marker, more like a stern but kind teacher. Still not soft, still not pillowy, but at least your skin isn't cooling against stone all night. You could almost imagine drifting off with this version, especially after a day of trudging through desert heat. Egyptians loved sycamore wood in particular, calling the tree sacred. Its shade was a gift, its bark medicine, and its wood sturdy yet workable. Some headrests preserve faint carvings of the goddess Atha emerging from sycamore branches, as if the very pillow carried divine embrace. Historians still argue whether the choice of wood was more symbolic than practical. Was sycamore used simply because it was common along the Nile, or because it carried spiritual protection into dreams? Either way, tonight you're pressing your cheek against the echoes of a sacred tree. Wooden headrests weren't reserved only for kings. Artisans in smaller towns could whittle them for commoners, though the decoration was plainer, no inlays, no ivory tips, just simple curves. A farmer lying down after a day tending wheat might lean his tired head on a modest wooden arch, dreaming of overflowing harvests. For him, the object wasn't art, it was endurance. Yet even the humblest version tied him to the same nightly ritual as a noble in Memphis, a tiny thread of equality across class lines. Now, don't picture these supports as fragile. The ebony ones especially were built to last, dense and dark as midnight. Touch it, and it resists your fingernails, polished to a shine that could double as a mirror. Wealthier Egyptians commissioned artisans to carve animal heads into the bases, cats, falcons, or jackals peeking up from the wood, as if they, too, kept watch while you slept. Your neck rests, but your guardian stares outward, daring anything to disturb your slumber. Sleep tight, scarabs. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some wooden headrests have been found with faint scorch marks, as though they had been left too close to oil lamps or maybe even used as improvised cooking stands before being cleaned up and placed under someone's head. Were Egyptians really so thrifty? Or maybe kids borrowed them for makeshift play? Archaeologists can't prove the backstory, but you can picture some exhausted parent scolding their child. "This is not a toy, it's your father's sacred neck block." One remarkable fact is that wood gave Egyptian artisans freedom to experiment with shape. Some versions curved dramatically upward, almost like a cradle, while others flattened to a thin bridge. Imagine trying to pick out the right pillow firmness back then. It was less about softness and more about whether your neck was short or long. A noble might order a custom headrest fitted exactly to his jawline, while another might prefer one with a gentler rise to ease breathing in the sticky nights. Even in antiquity, people argued about the best sleep posture. You can almost hear them gossiping in the market. "Oh, he sleeps on sycamore. My cousin swears by tamarisk, it's much cooler." Suddenly, your modern pillow shopping struggles don't feel so unique. Some things, like chasing a good night's sleep, never change. Historians still debate whether wooden headrests were genuinely more comfortable or whether they simply reflected social standing. Did wealthier people really prefer wood, or was stone for tombs and wood for daily life? Some believe that stone lasted better in graves, while wood was cherished for the living. Others argue the opposite. Stone was cooler in hot climates, wood for display. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere between practicality and prestige. As you recline, the wooden support creaks faintly, and you imagine the sound echoing through centuries. Its smoothness warms under your skin, a kind of closeness stone never offered. You realize you're resting not just on an object, but on a bridge between comfort, ritual, and artistry. Tonight, your dreams will drift between the river reeds, the scent of sycamore sap, and the quiet watch of carved wooden guardians. And if you think this feels like an improvement, just wait until someone hands you a gleaming piece of ivory and says, "Rest your head here, it's the Rolls-Royce of ancient pillows." Your head lifts from warm wood and lands with a gentle thud on something cooler, smoother, and so dazzling you almost forget to breathe. Ivory, creamy, polished, gleaming in the lamplight, curls under your neck like the tusk of a sleeping elephant reshaped into luxury. This isn't for farmers or priests. No, ivory headrests belonged to Egypt's elite, the kind of people who could glance at a pyramid and say, "That's my family tomb." You trace the surface and feel how flawlessly it's been polished. No splinters, no grain, just a perfect glide. Elephant ivory was rare and precious, hauled across long trade routes from Nubia or deeper Africa, sometimes even beyond. To own an ivory headrest meant two things: you had serious wealth, and you wanted everyone, including the gods, to know it. Imagine throwing a slumber party and pulling this out. Guests would gasp, and you'd casually say, "Oh, this old thing. Just my everyday dream support." Ivory headrests weren't always plain. Many were adorned with protective figures, tiny deities sculpted onto the sides. You lean close and notice the fierce grin of the dwarf god Biz etched into the curve. Biz was a protector of sleep, a household guardian who chased off nightmares. His bulging eyes and lion's mane beard may look comedic, but that's the point: scare the demons, amuse the humans. Sleeping on ivory wasn't just about status, it was about wrapping your dreams in supernatural insurance. Historians still argue whether ivory headrests were used nightly or reserved for rituals and burials. The material was so expensive that some believe elites displayed them in life but kept them pristine for death, placing them under mummified heads to signal eternal prestige. Others suggest these supports saw actual use, polished smoother by years of nightly contact. The mystery deepens with every excavated tomb. Some ivory pieces look brand new, as if they never touched a living neck. You roll your head slightly and notice the chill of the ivory. In the desert heat, that coolness is a luxury in itself. It almost feels like an ancient version of those fancy gel cooling pillows you see advertised today. The Egyptians may not have had memory foam, but they definitely knew the value of temperature control. And unlike stone, ivory carried a kind of warmth once your skin adapted, creating a unique balance of comfort and resilience. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ivory headrests were so elaborately decorated they could double as jewelry displays. Archaeologists have found ones with carved panels showing entire scenes, boats on the Nile, hunting expeditions, or ritual dances. Imagine balancing your neck on a miniature art gallery every night. Sleep comes slowly because you're too busy admiring the craftsmanship under your jawline. It's like falling asleep on a Faberge egg, possible, but not without nerves. And then there's the symbolism. Ivory came from elephants, animals known for strength, longevity, and memory. Egyptians, who wove meaning into everything from sandals to eyeliner, surely valued the association. To rest your head on ivory was to borrow a bit of that strength and carry it into your dreams. Maybe you'd hope to wake wiser, stronger, or more enduring, like the elephant whose tusk supported you. The prestige didn't stop at material. Many ivory headrests were inlaid with gold leaf or colored faience. Tiny details shimmered in lamplight, turning sleep into spectacle. You picture an elite dozing off, servants tiptoeing by, each careful not to disturb the gleam of their master's sacred slumber block. If the afterlife looked anything like their bedrooms, it must have been dazzling and slightly stiff-necked. You might be tempted to scoff at this extravagance. Who needs a golden-trimmed ivory headrest just to avoid rolling into the sand? But remember, for Egyptians, sleep was not trivial. Dreams were messages, and the head was sacred. Protecting it wasn't just about a good night's rest, it was about safeguarding the doorway between life and eternity. Ivory, expensive and rare, became a ticket to both prestige and cosmic safety. Still, you can't ignore the practical downside. If you've ever tried falling asleep on your phone by accident, you know the pain of hard edges. Imagine that, every night, on ivory. And unlike wood or stone, ivory could crack if mishandled. One unlucky toss in the night and snap, your fortune literally breaks under your head. Did wealthy Egyptians toss and turn less, or did they simply accept that discomfort was part of luxury? Historians still debate whether fashion trumped practicality, but judging by these ornate relics, prestige definitely came first. You roll your neck once more, staring at the ceiling shadows cast by oil lamps. Somewhere, outside your imaginary chamber, a jackal yips in the desert. The ivory beneath you feels simultaneously too precious and too fragile. Would you really dare to sleep on it? Maybe not. But in ancient Egypt, to rest on ivory was to declare yourself untouchable, guarded by wealth, gods, and the very memory of elephants. As your eyelids grow heavy, you realize something. Pillows in Egypt were never really about comfort. They were about status, symbolism, and the unseen world of dreams. And the ivory beneath you, gleaming softly in the dark, is the perfect example. You ease your head from the slick ivory and suddenly find yourself staring into the carved snout of a lion. Its mane flares across the base of a headrest, teeth bared, eyes unblinking. Not exactly the plush teddy bear you'd want beside you, but in ancient Egypt, animal motifs weren't about cuddles, they were guardians. You lower your neck onto the crescent and feel the silent protection of beasts keeping watch as you drift toward dreams. Lions were especially popular. Their strength and dominance mirrored the pharaoh's own authority. To rest on a lion-carved support meant absorbing a piece of that ferocity, as if even in your most vulnerable state, fast asleep, you carried the king of beasts beneath your skull. You can picture a noble waking up in the morning, cracking his stiff neck, and thinking, "Yep, slept like a lion." Falcons soared across these designs, too, wings outstretched in miniature reliefs. They weren't just birds, they symbolized Horus, god of the sky and protector of kings. A falcon-shaped headrest whispered of divine oversight, your dreams carefully guarded under a watchful gaze that missed nothing. Even while you snored, Horus kept his eyes sharp, which is comforting, unless you're self-conscious about drooling. And then there were the hippos. Yes, hippos. To us, they may look clumsy, but Egyptians knew them as dangerous and unpredictable creatures capable of snapping boats in half with a single lunge. A hippo motif under your head could signal strength against hidden dangers. Historians still argue whether hippo imagery was always protective or sometimes threatening, since the animals were both feared and revered. Sleeping on a hippo headrest might have been a way of taming that wild, dangerous energy, harnessing the chaos before it harnessed you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have unearthed headrests with monkeys etched into the base. Monkeys in Egypt were exotic imports, playful but also sacred. Some believe these little creatures were linked to Thoth, the god of wisdom, or even served as entertainers in royal courts. Imagine snoozing with a carved monkey grinning under your neck, as though it's in on the joke of your awkward sleeping posture. It's like the ancient version of a novelty pillowcase, except this one comes with divine associations. Not all animals were carved for intimidation or wisdom. Some headrests featured cats, sleek and serene, echoing the sacred presence of Bastet, goddess of home and protection. To sleep with a cat guardian carved beneath you must have felt both familiar and mystical, like the comforting weight of a modern cat curling at your feet, but sturdier, and less likely to claw you awake at dawn. Historians still debate whether these animal motifs were chosen by personal preference, by priestly advice, or by rigid tradition. Did someone walk into a workshop and say, "I'll take the lion one, please," the way you'd pick a phone case? Or were motifs carefully assigned, matched to the sleeper's destiny or social role? The uncertainty lingers, adding mystery to every carved beast unearthed. The artistry was no small thing. Picture an artisan hunched over ivory or wood, carving whiskers into a cat or feathers into a falcon. Each detail meant protection, so precision mattered. Even the smallest flaw could be seen as weakening the charm. When you rest your head tonight, you're literally lying on hours, maybe weeks, of devoted craftsmanship, every gouge of the chisel carrying intention. And it wasn't just for life. In tombs, animal motif headrests were placed beneath mummies to continue their protection in the afterlife. Imagine being wrapped tightly in linens, but knowing a carved lion still crouched beneath your skull, baring its teeth at spirits who might wander too close. Comfort may not have been the goal, but security was. The humor, of course, comes when you imagine the practical side. Try falling asleep with a hippo glaring up at you, or a falcon's wings poking your cheek. Protective, yes. Cuddly, no. You can almost hear an ancient child groaning, "Do I have to sleep on the crocodile one again? Can't I just have a plain headrest?" No luck, kid, safety first. Yet in their stiff beauty, these animal motifs carry something recognizable. You've probably seen animal print pillows, cartoon character bedsheets, or novelty sleep masks in modern bedrooms. Ancient Egyptians weren't so different. They wanted personality in their sleeping tools, a reflection of their beliefs, humor, and fears. Except instead of cartoon llamas, they had falcons of Horus. Different branding, same impulse. So tonight, as your head nestles onto the ark, remember that you're not alone. Lions roar softly in your dreams, cats purr invisibly at your side, falcons hover with wings unfurled, and hippos lurk beneath the ripples. Your head may ache from the hardness, but your spirit is guarded by an entire menagerie. The night grows warmer, and as you shift against your carved guardian lion, you notice something clever about the whole design. Your head is lifted slightly above the mat of woven reeds, air gliding beneath your neck like a secret breeze. In the desert heat, where even midnight feels like a sunburn, this is more than style, it's survival. Suddenly, the hard support makes sense. The Egyptian headrest was air conditioning for the soul. You can almost feel it. The sweat that normally gathers at your nape evaporates faster, leaving you just a touch cooler. The raised position also keeps your ears free, making it easier to catch the faint hum of night insects and the lapping Nile outside. In a place where temperatures still soar long after sunset, anything that kept you from sticking to your bedding was worth a stiff neck in the morning. This practicality extended beyond temperature. A lifted head meant your nose and mouth stayed above the dust that settled on reed mats. You weren't inhaling sand grains all night, and you were less likely to wake with your face crawling in tiny desert ants. It sounds dramatic, but in a world without bug spray, it was life-saving. Think of it as the original mosquito net, but instead of netting, it was simply good design. Historians still argue whether insect protection was the main reason for the elevated design or just a lucky side effect. Some scholars suggest the airflow mattered most, while others point out that keeping your head away from crawling pests would have been a huge incentive. And maybe, just maybe, the answer is both. Egyptians weren't fools, they lived in a hot, buggy land and designed accordingly. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tomb paintings show servants fanning sleepers with palm leaves, creating breezes over their elevated heads. It's almost comical. You've got the headrest for airflow, plus a human standing nearby acting like a ceiling fan. Imagine trying to sleep with someone waving leaves above your face all night. Maybe soothing, maybe annoying. If you've ever had a sibling hover too close while you're trying to nap, you know the feeling. The desert heat also made hygiene a nightly battle. Sweat meant odors, insects meant irritation, and low beds attracted dirt. By raising the head, Egyptians reduced contact with all of it. Your body might still be sticky, but at least your head, the sacred seat of your Ka, was protected. And since the head was considered the most important part of the body, keeping it clean and cool wasn't just comfort, it was spiritual preservation. You picture yourself lying flat without the headrest, hair tangled with sand, face damp and itchy. Now picture the same moment, but your head is lifted, a faint draft cooling your cheek. Suddenly the pillow doesn't seem like torture, it feels ingenious. Maybe we're the soft ones, spoiled by feather and foam, while Egyptians were mastering airflow long before Dyson fans hit the shelves. Some researchers even argue the elevated design helped with breathing, especially in stuffy rooms where oil lamps consumed oxygen. Propping the head could have eased airflow into the lungs, reducing snoring or helping with minor respiratory issues. Not that snoring disappeared, you can almost hear a weary spouse muttering in ancient Egyptian. Even with the fancy ivory headrest, he still snores like a hippo. Some problems are eternal. Of course, not every sleeper enjoyed the benefits equally. Pharaohs had golden or ivory supports, polished smooth for maximum coolness. Commoners had clay imitations, often rougher, less comfortable, and less effective at cooling. Still, even the humblest version gave some relief. Imagine a farmer, sweaty after a day in the fields, collapsing on a reed mat and sighing as the night air kissed the back of his neck. A small mercy, but a real one. The irony is that what feels harsh to us, the hardness of stone or wood, was exactly what made the design work. Soft pillows would trap heat and insects. A squishy cushion in the desert. That's basically an invitation for fleas to move in. Egyptians avoided fluff for good reason. By sacrificing softness, they gained airflow, hygiene, and longevity. It wasn't about pampering the body, it was about preserving it. You may laugh, but think of modern camping pillows, tiny inflatable things that promise to keep your head elevated without attracting dirt. Sound familiar? The Egyptians were doing the same thing, just without plastic valves. A headrest in 1500 BCE was the ultralight camping gear of its time, sleek, efficient, and slightly uncomfortable, but it worked. So tonight, as you lie on your raised neck support, picture hot desert winds whispering through open windows. Picture the coolness sneaking under your head, keeping you dry and safe. Your neck might ache in the morning, but you won't wake with beetles in your ears, and that's a victory worth celebrating. The desert breeze still drifts around your lifted neck, but now the scene shifts. You're not in a modest mud brick house anymore. You're stepping into the still, perfumed air of a tomb, torchlight flickering against painted walls. The silence presses heavy, broken only by the rasp of sand under your sandals. And there, beside a linen-wrapped figure, you spot a headrest. Not perched casually by a reed mat, but solemnly placed beneath a mummy's skull, waiting for eternity. It dawns on you, these weren't just for life. Egyptians believed headrests carried power into the afterlife. The object that once kept the bugs off your face at night now became a sacred device, guiding your soul safely into forever. You crouch beside the mummy and imagine sliding your own head into that cold curve. Suddenly the discomfort feels less like bad design and more like ritual armor. Many tombs reveal miniature versions of everyday headrests, carefully tucked under mummified heads. Some are plain wood, others ivory inlaid with protective figures. They weren't casual additions, they were deliberately placed to preserve the dead in the same posture they'd slept in alive. After all, death was just another form of sleep, and who wants an unprotected nap that lasts forever? Historians still argue whether these burial headrests were functional or purely symbolic. Did priests really expect mummies to use them, or were they simply emblems of continuity between life and afterlife? Either way, they appear so often in tombs that it's impossible to deny their spiritual importance. No pharaoh, priest, or even moderately wealthy artisan wanted to head into eternity without proper neck support. You notice the carvings, faint under centuries of dust. Some are inscribed with hieroglyphs invoking gods of protection. Others feature amuletic designs, ankhs, scarabs, and eyes of Horus. Each one is like a whispered prayer: guard this head, guard this soul, guard this journey. You realize the headrest is no longer just furniture, it's a talisman, part of the toolkit for immortality. Here's a quirky tidbit: some burial headrests were intentionally too small or too large, clearly impractical for everyday use. Scholars suggest these mini or giant versions were ritualistic, meant only for the dead. Picture trying to rest on a headrest the size of a brick. It's not for napping, it's for symbolism. Like being buried with a toy car instead of an actual chariot. A gesture, not a tool. In royal tombs, the headrests get even fancier. Imagine lifting the golden mask of Tutankhamun and discovering beneath it an ornate headrest, carved with protective deities glaring at unseen forces. For a boy king who needed eternal guardians, this was essential. The message was clear: no demon, no serpent, no wandering spirit gets past me. Death wasn't an end, it was a nightly sleep stretched to infinity, and you needed the same support to cross safely. But commoners weren't left out. Excavations in less grand tombs still reveal clay or wooden headrests under humble wrappings. Even the poorest Egyptian might find comfort in the idea that their head, seat of their spirit, was shielded in death. It wasn't about luxury, it was about belief. You might not afford ivory in life, but in death, you still deserved protection. The placement itself mattered. Always beneath the head, always supporting the neck. The body could be wrapped, disassembled, or even looted, but the head, propped carefully on its support, anchored the identity of the deceased. You can almost picture priests lifting the mummy, carefully aligning the skull with the headrest before sealing the tomb. One last act of tenderness for a body destined never to rise again. You pause, staring at the object glowing faintly in your torchlight. It's just a curved block, yet it holds enormous weight, literal and spiritual. Your modern pillow may cradle your dreams, but this ancient ark carried a soul into eternity. That's a bedtime upgrade you can't buy on Amazon. Of course, the practical side still sneaks in. Egyptians may have hoped the headrest also kept wrappings from crushing delicate facial features. By lifting the skull, the object prevented the linen from pressing too hard, preserving the face for eternity. Historians debate whether this was intentional design or happy accident, but either way, it worked. Many mummies still bear surprisingly intact profiles, heads gently tilted as if still dreaming. So as you leave the tomb, the air heavy with incense and silence, you feel differently about the headrest beneath your neck. It's no longer just a tool for cooling, or a symbol of wealth. It's a lifeline, bridging the fragile hours of nightly sleep with the endless sleep of eternity. And as strange as it sounds, that stiff little ark might be the most important pillow in human history. You step away from the tomb and carry that image of the mummy's propped head with you, only to stumble into another revelation. Some of these headrests were not blank or plain at all. Instead, their smooth arcs are alive with carved words, hieroglyphs whispering spells across the very surface where your neck would rest. You lean closer and trace the faint grooves, protective formulas etched into the curve like invisible lullabies. Imagine lying down at night, your head resting directly on lines of magic text. Every shift of your neck brushes against spells meant to ward off danger. The ancient Egyptians weren't just worried about physical discomfort, they were obsessed with unseen threats lurking in dreams. Spirits, demons, or wandering forces of chaos might slip into your sleep. But if the very object under your head carried protective words, you were armored from the inside out. Some inscriptions invoke gods directly. May Horus guard your dreams. May Bis frighten away the night terrors. These weren't casual bedtime doodles, they were precise charms, crafted by scribes and artisans working together. The headrest itself became a spellbook, silently chanting every time you closed your eyes. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions were intended for everyday sleepers or only for funerary use. Were ordinary people lying on protective prayers every night, or were these inscribed supports reserved for the afterlife? Some point out wear marks on certain pieces, suggesting nightly use, while others argue the pristine examples prove they were created solely for burials. As with so much in Egypt, the line between life and death was blurred. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some headrests feature phrases we'd consider oddly specific, like "keep away the snake that comes in darkness." Imagine needing such a spell. You're trying to drift off, but someone clearly thought snakes slithering into bedrooms were enough of a problem to warrant carving it into your pillow substitute. Suddenly, your fear of rolling onto your phone charger at night feels quaint. These magical inscriptions weren't limited to text. Some headrests carried painted symbols, bright pigments that have long since faded. Imagine placing your head on vivid blue hieroglyphs glowing in lamplight, the symbols bright enough to imprint themselves in your half-dreaming vision. Sleep wasn't just unconsciousness, it was a journey, and these designs were your tickets of safe passage. The protective aspect ties into a larger Egyptian belief: the night was dangerous. You weren't just vulnerable to physical threats like insects or heat, you were vulnerable to spiritual attack. The hours of sleep were when your BA, or soul, could wander. Without protection, it might not return. A headrest carved with spells acted like a spiritual seatbelt, keeping your essence anchored while still letting you roam the dream world. Imagine the reassurance of placing your head on such an object. Tonight, you don't just sleep, you sleep guarded. Every demon creeping at the edges of your vision, every nightmare waiting to pounce, sees the gleaming ivory or wood beneath your skull and reads the warning: back off, this dreamer is protected. It's like a celestial do not disturb sign, carved permanently into your furniture. One remarkable example shows the dwarf god Bis carved directly onto the ark where the head would lie. His comical, fierce features pressed right against your skin as you slept. That wasn't an accident. The very contact between your body and the carving formed a bond, a direct channel for protection. You weren't just near the spell, you were physically touching it, night after night. The magic even extended into sound. Some spells were written in ways that, when recited, created protective chants. You can almost picture a parent reading the inscription aloud before their child slept, voice low and steady, words echoing into the dark. Then, the child rests their head on those same carved words, double protected by voice and by touch. And just when you think you've seen everything, you learn that some inscriptions were comically practical. Alongside spiritual warnings, A few carry simple ownership marks, belonging to so-and-so. Imagine carving your name on your pillow so no one else in the household claimed it. Even in the ancient world, sibling pillow wars were real. So tonight, as you sink back onto your magical headrest, you don't just feel the curve against your neck, you hear the murmur of spells carved into its body. They rise softly like lullabies, weaving around you in invisible threads, keeping nightmares, snakes, and wandering spirits at bay. You may not find comfort in the hardness, but you do find safety. And perhaps that, for an ancient Egyptian, was the very definition of rest. Your eyes blink open from a night under Bis's watchful scowl, and you realize something subtle. Not all headrests look the same. In fact, as you wander through dusty museum halls and excavated chambers, you notice differences, some stubby and block-like, others tall and curved like elegant bridges. The design evolves across centuries, whispering the story of Egypt itself. Step first into the Old Kingdom. The headrests here are sturdy, straightforward, almost architectural. Think early pyramid building, massive, blocky, and practical. These supports are often carved from stone or plain wood, with little decoration. Function trumps flair. You can imagine a noble laying down after a day of inspecting construction at Giza, his head propped on a no-nonsense alabaster ark. His pillow says, "I am stable. I endure." Move forward into the Middle Kingdom, and you start seeing refinement. The curves soften, bases get more decorative, and inscriptions begin to appear more frequently. Some scholars suggest this reflects a broader cultural shift. Egypt was no longer just building monuments but also focusing inward, on personal piety and household protection. Historians still argue whether this change in headrest style was driven by new religious trends or simply by advances in craftsmanship. Either way, you can feel the difference when you rest your neck. The support is smoother, more deliberate, as though comfort was finally creeping into the design. Then comes the New Kingdom, and suddenly things get flashy. Ivory inlays, gilded details, protective deities carved into every corner. Your head isn't just supported, it's showcased. These headrests reflect the wealth and international connections of the era. Trade with Nubia and the Levant brought exotic materials, and artisans weren't shy about flaunting them. Sleeping in the New Kingdom meant balancing your skull on a work of art, a nightly reminder that Egypt ruled not just the Nile but the imagination of the ancient world. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some New Kingdom tombs, headrests are so elaborately decorated that archaeologists wonder if anyone ever dared to actually use them. Imagine trying to sleep on a golden ark covered in delicate faience. One wrong move and you've chipped off a tiny falcon's beak. Not exactly conducive to tossing and turning. Maybe these were show pillows, the ancient equivalent of decorative throw cushions you're not allowed to actually lean on. But it's not just materials and decoration that change. The proportions shift too. In earlier dynasties, the cradle that held the neck is narrow, almost precarious. Later examples widen, suggesting either new preferences in sleep posture or different interpretations of how the head should be aligned. Historians debate whether this widening reflects growing concern with comfort or a shift in medical understanding of posture. Either way, you find yourself less likely to slide off in your sleep, which is a small mercy. Regional differences also emerge. In Thebes, headrests often feature protective spells tied to local cults, while in Memphis, simpler, geometric designs dominate. It's as if even bedtime furniture became a canvas for Egypt's diverse spiritual geography. Your choice of headrest wasn't just personal taste, it was a declaration of where you came from and what gods you trusted most. One remarkable fact, some late headrests even incorporated moving parts, tiny hinges that allowed the cradle to adjust. That's right, ancient Egyptians invented adjustable pillows. Picture yourself reclining, fiddling with a little ivory hinge until your head rests at the perfect angle. It's equal parts ingenious and hilarious, like stumbling upon a 3,000-year-old lazed boy for your neck. As you drift through these centuries of design, you realize something: each era's headrests mirror its values. The Old Kingdom was about strength and permanence. The Middle Kingdom leaned into personal spirituality. The New Kingdom flaunted wealth and international flair. Each time your head meets a new curve, you're not just sleeping, you're resting in history's shifting tide. And perhaps most striking is the continuity. Across dynasties, across styles, one thing never changes: the belief that the head must be lifted, protected, and honored. No matter how elaborate the decoration or humble the material, the arc remains. A reminder that even as empires rose and fell, the Egyptians never compromised on one bedtime truth: the head was sacred, and sleep was serious business. So tonight, when you lie back against a polished arc from the New Kingdom, gold glinting faintly in lamplight, remember the generations before you who did the same, sometimes on rough stone, sometimes on sacred wood, sometimes on ivory fit for kings. Each curve cradled not just a neck, but an entire worldview. Your head shifts on the glittering New Kingdom arc, and suddenly you're aware of something uncomfortable, not in your neck, but in society itself. Because as much as these headrests carried spiritual and practical importance, not everyone's pillow was created equal. Pharaohs reclined on gold-inlaid ivory supports, while commoners scraped by with rough wood or even clay versions. Bedtime, like everything else in Egypt, mirrored the divide between the mighty and the modest. Picture a farmer trudging home at dusk, dust clinging to his legs, the day's labor etched in his shoulders. His sleeping space is nothing more than a mat of reeds, and at his side rests a crude clay headrest. No polished sheen, no protective carvings, just a basic curve baked in the village kill. He lays down, grateful for the air under his neck, but his dreams lack the gilded guardians that watch over the tombs of kings. For him, the headrest is functional, not divine. Now imagine a royal chamber. Servants light lamps scented with frankincense. The pharaoh steps onto a bed inlaid with ebony, his head meeting a gleaming ivory arc inlaid with gold, carved with falcons, lions, and protective spells. His dreams are not left to chance, they are cushioned by wealth, craftsmanship, and the full arsenal of divine guardianship. Even in sleep, the hierarchy holds. Historians still argue whether commoners placed as much symbolic weight on their simple supports as elites did. Were clay and plain wood purely practical, or did every Egyptian, regardless of class, believe the headrest was a shield for the soul? Some scholars argue that poorer households borrowed the symbolism without the extravagance, while others suggest that only the wealthy could truly afford magical pillows. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. Here's a quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found fake headrests made of plaster-coated wood, painted to look like ivory. Yes, even in ancient Egypt, knockoffs existed. Imagine proudly showing off your ivory pillow to visitors, hoping no one notices the paint flaking off. It's the 3000 BCE version of a designer handbag bought at the market. And the divide wasn't just in materials, it was in rituals. Elite headrests often carried inscriptions, prayers, or amulets attached to them. Commoners might own plain, undecorated arcs, with no spells to scare off the demons of sleep. That doesn't mean they were unprotected. Household gods like Biz and Tauret were believed to watch over ordinary people too, but the elite could afford constant, physical reminders. Think of it as the difference between owning a home alarm system and just trusting your neighbor's dog to bark at intruders. The disparity also extended into death. Pharaohs and nobles were buried with multiple ornate headrests, each one carved, gilded, and inscribed for eternal security. Commoners, if buried with a headrest at all, might receive a simple clay version, more a gesture than a true safeguard. Imagine lying for eternity on rough baked earth while a pharaoh rests forever on ivory gleaming with gold leaf. The afterlife, it seems, also had VIP seating. But don't pity the humble too quickly. Even the simplest headrest still carried dignity. The act of raising the head, whether on alabaster, ivory, or clay, was a statement that the head was sacred, no matter whose shoulders it sat on. A poor farmer might not have gold, but his neck was still lifted, his ka still preserved, his sleep still guarded by the shared cultural belief that sleep mattered. And perhaps, in some ways, the commoner had it easier. Fancy ivory headrests could crack, chip, or require careful maintenance. Clay and wood. Replaceable. If a child knocked it over during play, you could make another. Imagine the horror of a servant dropping the pharaoh's gilded headrest, probably a punishable offense. Sometimes simplicity meant freedom. As you lie there, your neck cradled by imagined clay, you feel the divide pressing down not from the hardness of the support, but from the weight of social order. Egypt's society was rigid, stratified, and even bedtime furniture couldn't escape its grasp. Yet at the same time, there's a strange equality. Rich or poor, you still lifted your head. You still sought airflow, protection, and dignity in sleep. Maybe that's the quiet beauty here. Comfort may have differed, but the ritual was shared. The pharaoh dreaming of conquest and the farmer dreaming of rain both lay on arcs, both believing their heads deserved elevation. Even across the yawning gulf of class, one truth endured: sleep was serious, and the head was sacred. So tonight, whether you picture yourself on clay rough as sandpaper or ivory smooth as moonlight, you share a ritual with the entire Egyptian world. And that, in its own way, is a kind of equality no pharaoh could erase. You wake from your clay or ivory dream and realize something funny. For all this cultural importance, no one is exactly sure how comfortable these headrests really were. Were ancient Egyptians stoic, shrugging off stiff necks because they cared more about symbolism? Or did their bodies adapt in ways we can't imagine? Comfort, after all, is a slippery thing. What feels unbearable to you might have been perfectly fine for them. Try this experiment in your mind. Roll up a towel, balance your head on it, and leave your neck hanging in the air. At first, you squirm. The pressure point feels sharp, the muscles ache. But give it a while, your body adjusts. Maybe that's how Egyptians managed. What feels to you like sleeping on a block of wood might have been their version of just right. Historians still argue whether headrests were primarily symbolic or genuinely practical. Some point out wear marks on surviving pieces, proof of nightly use. Others argue the most ornate examples could never have been functional and must have been reserved for ritual or burial. The debate boils down to this: were Egyptians prioritizing spinal alignment, airflow, and protection, or were they simply following tradition no matter how uncomfortable? Here's a quirky tidbit. In one experiment, modern volunteers tried sleeping on replica headrests for several nights. The results? Mixed at best. Some reported surprisingly decent rest, claiming the curve fit neatly into the base of the skull. Others tossed, turned, and awoke with aches. The headrest earned both shockingly fine and never again reviews, TripAdvisor for ancient sleep. Comfort might also depend on what you're used to. Egyptians didn't grow up with goose-down pillows or memory foam. They grew up with mats, reed beds, and wooden supports. If you never knew the bliss of sinking into a plush cushion, a carved ark might feel perfectly normal. It's like eating food you grew up with. It might strike outsiders as strange, but to you, it's home. One fascinating angle is medical. Some researchers suggest the elevated design actually benefited posture. By keeping the head lifted, the neck stayed aligned with the spine. In a world without chiropractors or ergonomic desks, maybe this hard arc was a primitive way to reduce strain. Imagine your head gently suspended, airflow cooling your scalp, muscles relaxing into a supported line. The design, however odd to you, may have been health-forward in its own minimalist way. Still, comfort is more than mechanics. It's also psychological. Picture lying on a decorated ivory ark, knowing the spells carved into it will scare away demons. Wouldn't that give you a sense of ease? Sure, your neck might ache a little, but your mind is calm, your spirit guarded. Maybe comfort, to the Egyptians, was as much about security as softness. And what about alternatives? Some evidence suggests people used folded cloths or mats under their heads for naps or casual rest. The headrest wasn't necessarily for every moment of sleep. Maybe it was like the difference between throwing yourself on the couch and tucking into bed properly. When it mattered, dream journeys, funerary sleep, or ritual rest, the headrest was used. For quick snoozes, a bundle of linen did the trick. You can almost hear a parent's voice. Come now, use your headrest properly. A child groans, preferring a pile of woven cloth. Some things never change, bedtime arguments transcend millennia. And comfort, as always, was subjective. Maybe some Egyptians hated them. Maybe they longed for softer supports but accepted tradition. Others might have sworn by them, finding their sleep incomplete without the reassuring lift of wood or ivory. The silence of history hides those preferences, leaving us guessing. But as you nestle your mind's head onto the carved curve, you sense something undeniable. Whether comfortable or not, these objects carried a weight of meaning that far exceeded physical rest. They weren't just about cushioning, they were about identity, ritual, and the eternal dance between body and spirit. Comfort might have been sacrificed, yes, but purpose was never in doubt. So tonight, as you feel the imaginary edge press beneath your skull, you might complain a little, maybe even laugh at the thought of Egyptians stoically toughing it out. But you also realize, comfort comes in many forms, and for them, the greatest comfort may have been knowing they slept under the gaze of gods. You lie there, still half wincing from the stiff pillow, and your thoughts drift to how little things can hold enormous meaning. The headrest wasn't just furniture, it was a miniature monument, carved with the same seriousness Egyptians gave their temples and tombs. Artisans, chiseling in the flicker of lamplight, treated each ark as a canvas where craft and faith merged. And the more you look at these pieces, the more you see that their beauty wasn't accidental. Imagine a workshop near the Nile, its air thick with wood shavings and the scent of resin. A craftsman sits cross-legged, smoothing the curve of an ivory cradle, pausing to etch the form of a lion's paw on the base. He isn't just making a headrest, he's telling a story in miniature. Every animal carved, every hieroglyph scratched, is chosen with care. For Egyptians, decoration wasn't frivolous, it was protection. Some headrests feature lotus flowers, their petals unfurling in eternal bloom. To you, it's a pretty motif, but to them, the lotus was rebirth itself, rising each dawn from the water. Laying your head on a lotus-carved ark meant aligning your nightly sleep with the cosmic rhythm of sunrise and renewal. It's like setting your alarm clock to the universe. Others display papyrus stalks, lions, or falcons. Each symbol meant something: a stork for fertility, a lion for strength, a falcon for Horus's watchful eye. Historians still argue whether these carvings were personal choices, tied to the sleeper's life, or more generic one-size-fits-all protections. Either way, you weren't just propping your head, you were nestling it into a sculpted spell. Here's a quirky tidbit. A handful of headrests discovered in elite tombs are so elaborately decorated that modern scholars suspect they were purely ceremonial, never actually used. One has intricate openwork carvings so delicate you'd be terrified to even glance at it too hard. Imagine trying to sleep on that, like putting your head on a lace doily made of bone. Practical? Not at all. Beautiful? Absolutely. But beauty wasn't limited to the wealthy. Even simpler wooden headrests often carried small carved details: an animal here, a curve there, suggesting that ordinary people too wanted a touch of art at bedtime. A poor farmer's ark might not glow with ivory, but a few etched lines gave it dignity. You can almost hear the craftsman's quiet pride, knowing even humble supports deserved beauty. And beauty had purpose beyond sleep. In tomb paintings, headrests are shown glowing in gold, set beside treasured objects. They weren't afterthoughts, they were part of the identity the deceased carried into eternity. Decorating them wasn't about flair, it was about announcing to gods and ancestors alike, I am watched, I am guarded, I am worthy of renewal. Consider also the geometry. The arc itself is often sleek, almost aerodynamic, narrowing into clean curves. The base widens for stability, sometimes taking the form of stylized legs or abstracted animals. There's balance in every angle, a harmony that echoes Egyptian art's obsession with order. Even a tiny household object reflects the great principle of Ma'at, balance, truth, cosmic order. Imagine dozing off every night with your skull supported by a symbol of the universe itself. Sometimes, though, decoration verged on playful. A few headrests depict dwarf figures, like Biz, not just scaring off evil but grinning mischievously. It's a reminder that Egyptians had humor woven into their art, that bedtime protection didn't have to be grim. You can picture someone chuckling softly as they set their head on Biz's broad belly, trusting that laughter too could guard against the night. And so, as you picture these carved treasures, you realize that beauty in Egyptian life wasn't optional, it was essential. A headrest could be plain, yes, but when it was decorated, every line, every curve, every tiny animal mattered. Sleep was a canvas, and your pillow, even if hard as stone, was a work of art designed to keep your spirit intact. So you let your mind's eye rest on a lotus-carved arc, the petals supporting your skull. You imagine drifting into dreams, knowing the bloom beneath your head promises that tomorrow you'll rise again, just as the sun always has. The carved lotus fades beneath your head, and now the scene around you shifts again. You're no longer lying on a bed of reeds or ivory. Instead, you're peering over the shoulder of a modern archaeologist crouched in a tomb's shadow. Dust swirls as brushes sweep delicately across centuries of silence, and suddenly, the humble headrest re-emerges into the light of day. The story of these objects isn't just ancient, it's still unfolding through discovery. Imagine the excitement of Howard Carter or Flinders Petrie, lanterns flickering, revealing not only golden masks but also small, curved supports tucked beside mummies. These weren't glamorous treasures by comparison, but to careful eyes, they mattered just as much. Each headrest gave clues, wood species hinting at trade routes, ivory revealing hunting or import, inscriptions offering glimpses of prayers whispered before sleep. Historians still argue whether headrests were primarily daily life tools or symbolic funerary goods discovered only because they lasted in tombs. The archaeological record is skewed, most surviving pieces come from elite burials, not everyday homes. That raises a mystery. How many plain wooden or clay headrests once served humble sleepers but decayed into dust, leaving us biased toward the rich? We may never know the full spectrum of Egyptian bedtime reality. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists in the 20th century tried lying on headrests they excavated. Picture it, scholars in desert tents, using priceless artifacts as makeshift pillows. They justified it as testing function, but really, it sounds like the world's most irresponsible sleepover. Thankfully, today's researchers stick to replicas. Museums now display these arcs behind glass, often overshadowed by flashier relics, but pause before one and you'll see the quiet intimacy they hold. A golden mask is ceremonial grandeur, a headrest is nightly life. Looking at one, you're glimpsing where a person literally laid their head thousands of years ago. Few artifacts feel so personal. The design variations unearthed are astonishing. Some are plain blocks, some shaped with elegance, others inlaid with colored glass or carved with protective gods. Each piece whispers the story of its owner, practical farmer, wealthy scribe, powerful priest. Archaeologists don't just see objects, they see the ghosts of sleepers still lying on them. And sometimes, excavation brings surprises. A few headrests have been found buried beneath layers of linen wrappings, positioned carefully to keep the deceased's head lifted in eternal repose. Others were placed beside the body, not under it, as if waiting for the soul to come back and use it properly. Each variation adds another puzzle piece, another debate about meaning and function. Even today, new finds refine the picture. A fragment of carved ivory here, a clay shard there, tiny but telling. Archaeology is patient, like sleep itself, unfolding slowly. Each brushstroke of dirt reveals not just an artifact but a human moment, the nightly ritual of laying one's head down and trusting in dawn. And yet, for all the discovery, much remains unknown. Were headrests truly universal, or reserved mainly for men of status? Did women and children use them equally? Did styles vary widely between regions, or was the form nearly standardized? Museums line their cases with examples, but the answers still drift just out of reach. So as you stand, dreamlike, beside the archaeologist's flickering lamp, you realize that you too are part of the unearthing. Every time you imagine one of these arcs, every time you picture an ancient sleeper breathing against desert air, you're dusting off history in your own quiet way. And maybe tonight, as you lay your head on your own pillow, you'll glance at its curve and wonder, if someone unearthed this centuries later, what story would it tell about you? The archaeologist's lamp flickers out, and suddenly you're back in your own time, lying with your head supported not by ivory or wood but by the plush embrace of a pillow. And here's the twist. As odd as those ancient headrests seemed, echoes of their design still ripple through the modern world. You didn't leave them in the tombs at all, you carried their spirit right into your bedroom. Think of orthopedic neck pillows, those curved foam supports your chiropractor swears by. Their job is eerily similar to the Egyptian arc. Lift the head, align the spine, improve airflow. Swap wood for memory foam, and suddenly the distance between 2500 BCE and your mattress store doesn't seem so wide. Comfort looks different, but the goal, support, remains. Historians still argue whether Egyptian headrests directly influenced later designs in Africa and Asia, or whether similar solutions popped up independently wherever people valued airflow and posture. Either way, the resemblance is uncanny. Bamboo headrests from East Asia, carved wooden supports from Ethiopia, even portable travel pillows in today's airplanes, they're all cousins in a global family of not-quite pillows. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Japan, geisha once used small wooden supports to protect elaborate hairstyles overnight. Imagine balancing your head like a porcelain doll, terrified of crushing your perfectly sculpted coiffure. Ancient Egyptians, too, may have appreciated that their arcs spared delicate wigs or oils. Turns out, don't mess up the hair is timeless wisdom. And then there's the psychological echo. Modern people talk about sleep hygiene, arranging the bedroom to feel safe, calm, and protective. Egyptians beat you to it by 3,000 years, inscribing Biz or Horus on their headrests. You light a lavender candle and lock your doors. They carved a dwarf god and prayed to Ra. Different props, same bedtime vibe. Some researchers even wonder if the minimalist appeal of hard, simple supports might return. In wellness circles, there's chatter about ancestral sleep, the idea that modern softness has spoiled posture. Could we one day ditch our plush clouds for something closer to a wooden arc, all in the name of spinal alignment? You might groan at the thought, but picture some influencer selling neo-Egyptian sleep blocks on social media, it's probably coming. And yet, continuity isn't only about function. The symbolic weight lingers, too. We still speak of resting our head as if it's sacred. The pillow, however fluffy, carries ritual, fluffing it, arranging it just so, even hugging it for comfort. Your pillow is the last thing you touch before dreams, just as theirs was the last carved arc their hands brushed before sleep or burial. Different materials, same intimacy. The parallels go further. Egyptians linked headrests with resurrection, and today, in a softer way, you still treat the pillow as the starting point of renewal. Get a good night's rest, people say, because tomorrow you rise again, hopefully less cranky. The cycle of sleep and waking hasn't changed, even if the furniture did. So you realize that when you laugh at the idea of wood under your skull, you're laughing at your own reflection across time. You're still chasing posture, airflow, protection, renewal. You've just swapped hieroglyphs for stitching, ivory for cotton, spells for scented sprays. The continuity is undeniable, a quiet reminder that across cultures and millennia, humans haven't changed as much as you think. And tonight, as you sink into your pillow, you can almost hear a faint echo of the past. A carved lotus beneath a noble's head, a wooden ark under a farmer's skull, a bamboo cradle for a geisha's hair, all whispering the same thing: sleep now. Rise renewed. The whisper of renewal lingers, and before you know it, you're watching a modern researcher haul a replica headrest onto a mattress. The cameras are rolling, the lab lights are too bright, and the test subject looks way too enthusiastic for someone about to spend the night with a block of wood under their neck. Welcome to the curious world of recreations, where archaeologists, artists, and the occasional brave YouTuber try to live like ancient Egyptians, at least until sunrise. The experiment usually begins with optimism. The researcher explains the curved design, the airflow benefits, maybe even jokes about chiropractors loving it. Then the moment of truth, they lower their head onto the replica. There's a pause, a wince, then the forced smile of someone realizing history was not built for modern neck muscles. It's hilarious, in the most scholarly way possible. Still, some report surprising comfort after the initial awkwardness. The slight lift aligns the neck, opens the airway, and even cools the skin. One modern sleeper claimed it reduced snoring, though his partner's skeptical face in the background suggested otherwise. Historians still argue whether Egyptians genuinely found them restful or if people just tolerated them because soft pillows wasn't an option. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some replicas are so polished they squeak when you move, creating an unholy soundtrack of wood-on-skin groans. Imagine trying to drift off with a constant eek every time you roll. Sleep trial videos often end with the tester giving up at 3 a.m., retreating to their regular pillow like a soldier limping off a battlefield. Artists, too, love recreating headrests, not to sleep on, but to showcase their elegance. Exhibitions display modern interpretations in glass, metal, even 3D printed resin. Seeing them alongside originals, you realize the form is timeless, a sculpture that transcends comfort and doubles as high design. Minimalist furniture makers would be proud. And it's not just labs and galleries. Travelers to Egypt sometimes buy small replicas from markets, imagining they'll use them at home. Spoiler alert, most end up as quirky bookends or paperweights, not bedside essentials. The joke writes itself. The only way to comfortably sleep on one in modern times is if you never actually try. Yet recreations have value. They let us feel, however briefly, what ancient people experienced. They bridge imagination with reality. Even if the night ends with stiff shoulders, the experiment proves something. These weren't random curiosities. They worked, at least for those accustomed to them, woven into rhythms of daily life. And beyond sleep, replicas rekindle symbolism. Some modern users set them on altars, not for comfort but for meaning, reminders of renewal, balance, or cultural heritage. Just as Egyptians inscribed spells, modern dreamers imbue replicas with quiet significance. The headrest becomes once again what it always was, more than furniture. So you laugh at the sight of a YouTuber groaning through the night, but you also recognize the earnestness. Trying, failing, learning, that's part of connecting with the past. Every wobble of the neck, every awkward shuffle, is a tiny act of empathy with someone who lived thousands of years ago. And when the modern tester finally fluffs their real pillow and surrenders, they sigh with relief, maybe whispering a thank you to Egyptian ingenuity for at least making them appreciate what they have. That's the legacy of recreations. Not that you'll trade memory foam for wood, but that you'll remember comfort is a spectrum, and you're very lucky to nap on the fluffy end of it. The laughter from failed sleep trials fades, and now you drift further, following the echoes of those carved arcs beyond Egypt's borders. You realize the story doesn't end along the Nile. It ripples outward, reshaping across continents, centuries, and cultures until it touches even your own bedtime habits. In Ethiopia, for instance, wooden headrests remarkably similar to Egyptian ones are still used today, carved with elegance and often passed down as heirlooms. Nomadic herders carry them not just for sleep, but as portable stools and symbolic markers of adulthood. You picture someone balancing under a vast African sky, head lifted on a block of polished acacia, dreaming while cattle shift nearby. The continuity is astonishing. Across the Red Sea, Arab cultures adopted wooden supports that blend practicality with artistry. In parts of East Africa, intricately decorated headrests serve both as pillows and personal treasures, their surfaces engraved with geometric patterns. Historians still argue whether these designs were inspired by Egypt directly or arose independently in response to the same climate challenges: airflow, insects, posture. Either way, the resemblance is uncanny. Travel further east and you stumble upon China and Japan, where porcelain and wooden headrests were used for centuries. Some were smooth and austere, others painted with delicate flowers, turning the knightly neck cradle into a miniature canvas. A quirky tidbit: in Japan, some supports were filled with small drawers, so your head literally rested on a secret stash box. Ancient Egyptians would have approved two functions in one design. And then there's the world of modern design. Ergonomic experiments with hard supports, orthopedic neck cradles, and even minimalist lifestyle fads all echo the headrest's legacy. Somewhere out there, a sleep guru is trying to convince people that true comfort means ditching fluff and embracing firm supports. You can almost hear a pharaoh chuckling, "Took you long enough." What makes these echoes more than coincidence is the universality of the human body. Necks, spines, airways, they've always needed the same care. Whether through alabaster, bamboo, porcelain, or foam, the goal remains identical: elevate, support, protect. Every culture invented its own solution, but in the end, they all rhyme. And beyond the body, the symbolism carried forward. Sleep remained sacred, dreams remained messages, pillows remained more than mere furniture. In Africa, headrests are sometimes linked with ancestral spirits. In Asia, they guard beauty and hair. In the West, we tuck lavender under ours and whisper about sweet dreams. All of it, at its core, is the same dance between rest, protection, and renewal. So when you look at your pillow tonight, you're not just looking at fabric and fluff. You're looking at a descendant of countless arcs, curves, and supports across history. You're holding the end of a thread that stretches through tombs, across deserts, into temples, under stars. The story is still alive, right beneath your cheek. And now, it's time to set that thread down gently. The night is quieter now, the details softening. Your mind drifts away from stone and ivory, wood and porcelain, and settles into the rhythm of your own breath. The history you've traveled through is vast and layered, yet it hums with one simple truth: across every age and culture, people lay their heads down at night and trust in tomorrow. The sharp edges of carved supports blur into smooth horizons, and the heavy weight of debates and theories dissolves into silence. You're left with the comforting thought that sleep itself is timeless, that no matter the shape beneath your neck, the act of closing your eyes links you to countless dreamers who came before. Imagine the desert breeze passing over stone headrests, the quiet hum of insects, the hushed prayers whispered in tombs. Imagine geisha balancing their hair, herders resting under stars, you sinking into your own pillow. The images blend, dissolve, soften. Your pillow, however modern, carries the echoes of all those arcs and curves, all those nights of trust. And as you let go now, you join that unbroken line of sleepers, breathing evenly, sinking deeper, drifting gently. Sleep is the final inheritance. Let it carry you, quietly, softly, endlessly.